There's a slang and a jargon in most fields. Technically, just about everyone who has a retirement account is engaged financially with the world of Wall Street. But how well do you understand and speak the language of that world? Alpha and beta are the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, but on Wall Street, they have meaning. Alpha is the measurement of return over and above the market benchmark. Beta measures a stock's degree of volatility. Countless other technical terms and phrases are thrown around that most of us would struggle to define. Point being, most of us entrust our financial future to someone who understands and speaks in a world that we don't understand. We put our faith in them, and if that's true financially, how much more so with matters of eternity, of the world to come? Only Jesus speaks with authority and invites us to entrust our eternity to Him. Welcome to Haven Today. I'm David Wollen, sharing the great story that's all about Jesus, and we're continuing today in our series, The Surprising Story of Amazing Grace. There are two threads to the story. The flesh and blood story, the life of John Newton, who was a slave trader the Lord drew back to Himself, later became a pastor and a hymn writer whose compositions include the world's most famous hymn, Amazing Grace. So John Newton's life is the story we're telling this week, but the other thread is the hymn itself. In a sense, we're telling both stories at once, though, because the lyrics of Amazing Grace essentially cover the story arc of John Newton's life. He was a wretch, a hopeless, desperately wicked man who, by an act of God's incredible grace, his life turned around. God rescued him from the darkness that had engulfed him. And today we're going to tell what I think is the most fascinating part of his story. The entire story, however, was just released on DVD by Haven Today. It's a Haven Films production, a feature-length docudrama called Amazing Grace, The Untold Story, and we want you to see this film. The only place you can get it is from Haven Today, and I invite you to do that. In the film, top-level talent, along with a Christian-based Hollywood film studio, and even an original film score created by British composer Michael Andrews. That's the music you're hearing in the background this week, but the quality isn't the best reason to get it. It's because the film is a message of grace, the grace that only comes through faith in Jesus Christ. This is a film that was made with every kind of viewer in mind, even non-believers, who we pray will be intrigued as they hear about the story of John Newton, and through that, come to see why God's grace is truly amazing. And Amazing Grace, The Untold Story on DVD is our thank you for your gift of ministry support to Haven Today. We're 100% funded by the gifts of our listeners. Regular people in all walks of life, people just like you, are those who keep the message on the air. So would you respond with your gift today? Two ways to do it. You can give by phone at 865-HAVEN, again, 865-HAVEN, or you can give through the website at haventoday.org, and be sure to request the DVD when you give. Again, haventoday.org. This is Haven Today. I'm David Wollen, and we're going to pick up the story of John Newton right where we left off yesterday. Those who know some of his story probably know about the great storm at sea, how his ship almost went down. It terrified him. He cried out to God, and right there, he went from defiant atheist to wanting to turn toward God. And now we'll return to the conversation with world-renowned John Newton scholar, Dr. Bruce Hindmarsh. Okay, so the storm is past. They survived the night. Newton's now cried out to God, the one whose very existence he'd previously denied. So now what?
He's not an atheist. He's not an agnostic. He's going, there is a God. What does this now require of me? And when they at length reach Ireland, he goes to church and he makes vows.
Yeah.
I will be a Christian.
Yeah.
I will be a serious Christian. This is much more serious now, and I need to live the Christian faith.
And for me, this is a fascinating kind of juncture in the story and in his journey. And we think it's kind of a clean pathway to redemption.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, great. You know, he being on Plantain Island, that's like living with the pigs and eating the scraps. But then he's rescued, and now he's coming home to his father. All will be well.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
weeds, it's so much more messy and
Yes.
confusing.
Yes. And when he would later write about this, he wanted people to understand that it wasn't, if you like, a V-shaped conversion. It was U-shaped and had quite a flat U.
Yeah.
Like there was a
Yeah.
sense in which he just knew it was like he said, it wasn't like the bright noonday brightness of who God is. And it was more like he said, the faint dawning of the day, a faint twilight. It just, the light slowly came into his life. And so within 6 months, he's on a slave ship. This is his industry. This is his trade. He
Right.
said
He's back to work.
he didn't particularly think of it. He said it was an unpleasant job, like being a jailer. He said he didn't understand, as he would later, to his horror, the evil in which he was complicit. But he's back on a slave ship, and within 6 months, he said he returned like a dog to its vomit.
Hmm.
Maybe some of us know what this is like. We think, okay, I'm never going to go back there again. I'm never going to do the things I used to do. And then it's like, oh God, how come I'm back there again? How come I returned like a dog to its vomit? How come I can't change?
Yeah. Well, and it seems like from my read of it, I
Yeah.
mean, we think he wants to live as a Christian, but does he really understand the grace of God? Does he really understand the Savior who's died on the cross for him? It seems to me like he's kind of a do-it-yourself salvation with a Christian flair to it.
Oh, that's it. No, I think that is it. I think that's what he means by being a serious Christian is I'm just going to try harder. And I'm going to do this now. There's a call in my life. I need to do this. But he really hasn't come to that point where he goes, I need God to do for me what I cannot do for myself.
Precisely. That's it.
I need a power and a grace that comes to more deeply reckon with how deep is my condition, how lost I really am, and how much I need God to save me.
Yeah.
I need a crucified Savior who's died for me. I need the empowering presence of the Holy Spirit to do what I cannot do myself. And that moment comes. I mean, there are moments in his biography, the symmetry is unbelievable. He's back on Plantain Island as a slave trader, as a junior officer on a slave ship. He's back now trading on the island where he had previously been so destitute, except he again has a tropical malarial fever of some sort, and he crawls to an isolated spot on the island like he's dying.
Hmm.
And it's going, okay, this has to stop. And this is the point where he says he has an evangelical conversion, not a legal conversion.
Hmm.
He, at a point of desperation, he says, okay, no more of this, me just trying to do my best and working this out by myself. God, I need you. I desperately need you. I need you, Jesus. I need what you've done on the cross for me. I need you to do for me what I cannot do for myself. And it's a genuine conversion. And then he's back on board a slave ship,
Yeah. That I feel like that is the hardest part of this whole story.
isn't it?
That's the does not compute.
Yeah.
I don't have categories for understanding this. And yet that's part of his story, and it's not just a moment, it's years, right?
And we need to hear it. I feel like we use this image in the film. It's like two tectonic plates are overlapping, and you can feel the tension, the kind of tremors that are going on. We're kind of going, how can you not see it? Surely there are some things, like they say about genocide and other, something you can't not know. Surely that he knows that he needs to leave the slave trade. And yet it's going to be 4 or 5 years, David, before he leaves the slave trade.
And even that was not willing, right? He was intending to go out again. And finally, the Lord just intervened with a severe mercy and
Yeah,
knocked him flat on
yeah.
his back.
He had what they called an apoplectic stroke. He blacked out. He's in Liverpool. He's married. He married Mary Catlett. He didn't want to leave her. And whether it's psychosomatic, whatever went on, there are signs that he was uncomfortable with what he was doing.
Hmm.
And whatever happened, after he had that fit, that stroke, and didn't go out on that particular slave journey, he never went back.
Yeah.
So whatever was going on internally that we don't know, he never went back. He has a year when he is in London and Liverpool, and it's like he catches up spiritually. he catches up to the evangelical revival.
Yeah.
He hears people like Wesley and Whitfield and dissenting preachers, and he's soaking it up like a sponge.
Yeah.
And then he gets a civil service job in the customs office in Liverpool. He actually has a lot of time to study and to devote himself to learning more about the faith. Unbelievably learned during these years, but
Incredible.
also
Yeah.
just beginning to preach as a
Yeah.
lay preacher, beginning to support the work of the ministry, meeting people like George Whitfield, the great 18th century preacher. People called him Little Whitfield. Evidently, he had a real heart as a lay person for ministry, and he began to wonder. There's a journal that he kept about thoughts concerning ordination, and he began to wonder, could God use me to show and demonstrate his grace to others, that what I've received, I can begin to pass on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's during this period that he begins to write that autobiography. In a way, it's almost like writing his CV. This is what God has done for me.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere that I can serve? Is there somewhere that I can serve? And that's when he is eventually ordained to this parish in the Church of England, where he'll have a remarkable ministry. He becomes one of the great pastors of the 18th century. He becomes a revivalist. He becomes a preacher. There's a local revival. They have to add a balcony to the
Right.
church. He's a preacher with the common touch. With what he's been through, he's able to communicate to people.
Yeah.
He's able to communicate the gospel. And wherever he picked up this kind of musical education, a poetic sense, being able to write verse, he begins to write hymns to go along with his sermons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every week he's writing hymns. And the poor lace makers that made up much of the population and day laborers in the town of Olney in the English Midlands, while they're out working the fields or working at their lace making in their cottages, they could sing these hymns and remember the sermon.
Yes.
And the hymns and the sermons would go together. And he had midweek meetings and he had prayer meetings and he would visit people and he had the common touch. We talked earlier about wounding with our wounds and how we can hurt with the way we've been hurt. But again, that gets turned around into a
Mm-hmm.
great empathy. There are suicides in town. He's got to comfort grieving parents. Smallpox epidemic comes through. When people were hurting, he was there and he understood because that was something that God
Yeah.
redeemed. But I think part of it is having experienced quite deeply his own need for God, having suffered and met the Lord and found his grace, having sinned and repented and found forgiveness, he was able to minister to people in his preaching and in a vast correspondence. David, I've read hundreds and hundreds of his letters in manuscripts and archives all over the United States and Britain. And it's just astonishing the way I remember one letter he writes to somebody and he says, and these are people who are suffering down in Cornwall and with illness and hardship. And he said, I've been thinking about you and yours upon my knees. And it's like he's been on his knees praying for them and he gets up and he dips his pen in the ink well and he begins to write. I think we would call these today letters of spiritual direction, letters of spiritual counsel. And there are collections like this that people cherished
Yeah.
and they're passed down from generation to generation. And there's hundreds of these letters. And he published some of them in his own lifetime. And you maybe read Cardiphonia, which is
Mm-hmm.
utterances of the heart. And people just thought he was a wonderful letter writer. And they kept these letters. These letters helped them spiritually, and they comforted and they counseled them spiritually. So he's a parish minister.
Yeah.
He sees local revival. He's a preacher. He's a part of a vast network that's growing of evangelical ministry, gospel ministry in England. And then in around 1780, he moves to London and has a parish across from the Bank of England in the heart of the city. And I think this becomes the key moment when he realizes he needs to come out and say something about the slave trade.
Yes.
So there are signs that already he had some concerns of conscience about the slave trade. A friend of mine, John Coffey, a historian at Leicester, has done some work on this, and there are signs in correspondence in the circles that he was running in things that the Quakers were writing early on,
Mhm.
and testimony that they were appealing to from slave traders, that Newton may have already privately had serious misgivings about the slave trade.
Yeah.
He's moving in anti-slavery circles. His friend William Cooper is writing poems against slavery. And there's signs that Newton, whatever private remorse that he felt as the conscience of the nation is being more quickened and he becomes more aware of what he'd been involved in. He may even, as early as the 1750s and 60s, had been privately supporting these movements. But now he's in London.
Yeah.
He's in the metropole itself, the heart of politics and trade and commerce. And he's encountering people like William Wilberforce, whom he will mentor spiritually. And it's like it's time to speak out, and he does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one of the astonishing things, I'm so glad he lived long enough to be able to do what he could. He knew there's nothing that could take away the evil that he had been a part of. But he felt like he said, I need to walk softly all my days, knowing how much I've been forgiven.
Yeah.
People would write to him. He was given an honorary doctorate from Princeton. People would write to him, Dr. Newton, and he said, if you write to me like that again, I'm going to return the letter. I don't deserve that honor. It belongs to the Africans. And then in the late 1780s and 90s, as Enlightenment humanitarians, Quakers,
Hmm.
evangelicals, others freed black slaves and others, there's a growing momentum about anti-slavery, and Newton steps in. And he not only counsels Wilberforce and encourages him to stay in politics and to stay. Wilberforce's sons said Wilberforce could not be in Newton's presence for half an hour without him talking about the slave trade.
Hmm.
It was time to encourage them to do what they could to bring an end to this systemic evil. He gives evidence to a House Select Committee, to the Privy Council, the Prime Minister, and he gives testimony. And it's testimony that really has an impact
Yeah.
because he is a trusted figure. He's a
Yeah.
figure of public trust. They know that he's not lying when he talks about this. And then he writes his thoughts concerning the African slave trade. He puts pen to paper and it with brutal honesty. And he knows, he said, I could be branded a hypocrite for
Yeah.
saying these things about something from which I profited. And it's a source of great humiliation to me, he
Yeah.
says. But then he writes with brutal honesty about what it was really like on board.
And that's something that I think we have to just kind of pause and appreciate what this really is for him, what it means for him. I think all of us can relate to, boy, there are parts of my life that are dark, and I'm glad that no one can go into that darkness and see what was really
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And with shame, we kind of protect that or want to kind of parcel that off. And we know that the Lord sees it, but it doesn't mean we have to go tell everybody. But now he is at a point in his life where he knows the Lord has put me here so that I will tell it. I will speak it. There's a painful obedience, I think, to this that's just weighing on his conscience, that he has to speak. He has to bring it into the light.
That's a good phrase, a painful obedience. He's basically my age. I'm 63. And in his 60s, he has to allow onto his conscience and reckon with what he did in his 20s. And it would have been easier to say nothing. He could have avoided it. His wife is dying of cancer.
Yeah.
And this private grief is going on. And he steps in. And, he'd be the first one to say, I'm not the hero of this story. Think about what the Africans themselves have been through. Think about Olado Equiano. Think about Phyllis Wheatley. There's all sorts of other Christian slaves and ex-slaves who had their own stories to tell. He said, if you look at me, what I want you to see is a monument, a signpost. It's not about me, it's about God's grace. And look at me, and you will see a parable of God's grace, God's mercy. And I love that phrase. I need to walk softly all my days,
Mm,
knowing what I've been forgiven. And that's the way he entered into his old age.
yeah.
And, he lost his beloved Polly. He continued to preach until the very end. And he was aware of just he undeserved mercy, that God's mercy that he got to marry Mary Catlett. got to marry his beloved. He didn't deserve that. That he had a respected position as a pastor and had an opportunity to serve in that kind of a public role, all things he felt like he didn't deserve. And he said as the end was coming, he said, I want to, in the face of death, be able to retire like a thankful guest from a full table.
Mm.
Just a lovely image of being aware of all he'd been given. And that's what he wanted people to remember, is that God was gracious to him. It wasn't what he deserved. But I think it's wonderful that he did what he could, and he continued to preach the gospel, but he also was instrumental in bringing down the slave system that he had been a part of.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's hard to know, counterfactual speculation, what would have happened if he hadn't stepped forward.
sure.
But I think it's reasonable to say that the abolition of the slave trade would have been delayed by, perhaps a decade if it wasn't for the kind of testimony that he offered and the way he supported this work. It's
Yeah.
hard to say, but it definitely was a crucial role that he played. And when the time came, he stood up and he did what he had to do to make a difference.
And I think that's one of the reasons Amazing Grace has the gravitas it does, at least in part. What a wonderful witness to the gospel, to the grace of Jesus Christ. Dr. Bruce Hindmarsh, I'm so thankful you took the time, even in the midst of your study sabbatical at Oxford. Thank you for coming and speaking with us today. I'm so, so grateful.
Oh, I'm glad we could have this conversation to talk about this today, David. Yeah.
If you just joined us in the last few minutes, this is Haven Today. I'm David Wollen, and it's taken us several days now on Haven Today to tell the story of John Newton's life. What a fascinating journey that ultimately points us to the grace of Jesus. He is the one whose grace is amazing. And ultimately, that's what the film Haven is just releasing. It's out this week exclusively from Haven Today. That's what this film is all about. Amazing Grace, the Untold Story. It's a docudrama with top-name actors. Kappa Studios in LA did the editing and the post-production. Their expertise created a marvelous film, and it even has an original film score. Deeply moving. And the making of the true story of John Newton and of Amazing Grace is now available in this feature-length film. And it's a chance to share the grace of Jesus with others. And we hope that that's one of the things you may be able to do with this. We'd love for you to get the DVD. Just be sure to ask for Amazing Grace, the Untold Story when you call with your gift to 865-HAVEN. Again, 865-HAVEN, or online at haventoday.org. Again, haventoday.org. I'm David Wollen. Won't you come back again next time? We'll be keeping it all about Jesus. It's the great story here on Haven Today.